Welcome to Beatsource Tech. My name is Mojaxx and today we're looking at the latest from Pioneer DJ. This is a product that's aimed squarely at the open format world. This is the DDJ-REV5. I began the Beatsource Tech series by reviewing the DDJ-REV7 and the REV1. Those were, at the time, big departures for Pioneer DJ. Typically, their all-in-one controllers had been closely aligned with their club series gear, but with the REV series, the company were aiming much more at open format and hip-hop DJs. This meant that the REVs had battle-style layouts and mixer sections which were more akin to their S-series battle mixers. I was, and remain, a massive fan of the top-end $2,000 REV7, with its spinning platters and hardware effects. I named it my product of the year for 2022, and that was up against some stiff competition. The REV1 is a more budget, compact offering, and is also a solid performer for its $280 price tag. But as the model numbering system implies, there was always a sizable gap between those two. So now we have the DDJ-REV5, which is very much intended to fill that hole at a price point of $1,099 in the US. Like the other products in the REV series, it's laid out battle style. That means the pitch sliders are positioned horizontally at the rear of the unit, and the play-pause button is on the right-hand side of each deck section, as opposed to being on the left where you'd find that on a CDJ. I know some people aren't really fans of that layout, and I can understand that, but fundamentally the REVs are designed to mimic the feel of turntables and a battle mixer, not CDJs, and Pioneer DJ already offer other controllers which are more like those. We'll get onto those later. One quite important thing to mention here, the trend over the past year for new Pioneer DJ products has been for them to support both Serato and Rekordbox, something I'm sure will only become more entrenched now that Alpha Theta have acquired Serato. But neither the REV1 or REV7 supported Rekordbox at launch, and indeed they still don't at the time of making this video, but the REV5 has that dual software support right out of the gate. We'll start with what I think is the highlight, the Jog Wheels. No, they aren't spinning platters, but they are, for me, the next best thing. Mechanical CDJ-style jogs with adjustable tension. I felt very comfortable on them immediately, and being able to tweak how loose or tight they feel is a real step up over something like the FLX GT. They don't feel quite as premium as the jogs on the FLX 10 or CDJ-3000s, but whether pitching or scratching, performance is tight and precise, and I have zero complaints about them whatsoever. The in-jog displays are fairly minimal, with the most basic info like which deck is active and a segmented playhead display. Nothing to write home about, but also no issues. The build quality of the REV5 seems pretty solid. There's a lot of plastic in the construction, but no obvious weak points. And it also means that the REV5 is light at just over 6 kilograms or 13.5 pounds. As the jog wheels are of a similar size to the platters on the REV7, the dimensions are overall very close to that, and indeed I'm sure most cases or bags designed for the REV7 will also fit the 5, so finding a way to transport it shouldn't be a challenge. The sound quality is definitely there when it comes to the interface. It's spec'd at 48 kHz 24-bit and sounded great to me in use, whether on studio monitors or larger speakers. Pioneer DJ's latest generation of audio interfaces have really given me no causes for concern whatsoever. In terms of connectivity, the REV5 is definitely on point considering its price bracket. It's very much just a controller, so there are no standalone mixer functions or phono inputs, but it does have an aux input on RCAs, which is a hardwired pass-through, so ideal for backup in the event of your computer crashing. There are two mic inputs with separate level controls, shared high and low EQ, and individual attenuators on the rear. Both are balanced connections, with mic 1 on a combo jack and XLR socket, and mic 2 on a jack only. I found them to perform very well in my testing. The output section makes me very happy indeed. You have master output on balanced XLRs and unbalanced RCAs, plus a separate booth output on balanced jacks. This is the standard configuration for all of Pioneer DJ's pro level kit and really speaks to the target market of the REV5. Where things get interesting is on the USB and power side of things. There are two USB sockets to connect to computers, both of which are USB-C. At the danger of repeating myself, I'm aware that not everyone loves USB-C, but I do, and I appreciate the DJ industry moving more in line with other areas of tech by switching over to that new standard. So I like those connections a lot, and the fact there is two of them means this will be really useful when switching over between different DJs at gigs. Then next to the power button is another USB-C socket, and this one is for power only. I was a touch confused at first as Pioneer DJ supply the REV5 with a power supply which looks like a traditional brick, but I was delighted to discover that, in fact, you can use a regular USB-C power plug with it, the kind you might get with a laptop nowadays. A very low power option won't have enough juice, but I tried the one supplied with my iPad and that ran the REV5 just fine. What does that mean? Well, the unit can't run off USB bus power, but it does mean that unlike with older Pioneer DJ controllers where you needed a barrel style power supply, which was fairly fragile and hard to replace, you can pick up a suitable USB power supply for the REV5 in pretty much any town and city in the world. So if the supplied one gets broken or lost, you are all good. I will also note that although there's no power delivery pass-through, you could also pick up a high-powered multi-port USB-C power supply and run both the REV5 and your laptop off of one plug. So overall, this is a solid upgrade as far as I'm concerned. Moving on to the faders, things are solid overall. The crossfader is one of Pioneer DJ's latest Magvale units, the same one as found on the DJM A9 club mixer in fact, and is clean and precise with a sharp cut and short cut-in distance. I liked it on there and I like it on here. There's no adjustable tension, but there is continuous curve control and a hamster switch on the front panel. The up faders are stiffer but still feel good and are the same as those found on the DDJ-1000 and FLX 10, so I'm confident to say they will last. Moving on to the rest of the mixer section, things are fairly close to the REV7 in terms of layout. It's laid out like a battle mixer, so the faders are in the middle with bright and clear level meters in between. Then you get to the pad section, which I'll show you shortly, and above that, the effects. This is where the REV5 really does depart from the 7 as it has no hardware effects, only software. They're all laid out the same with activation paddles for each side and 6 effects select buttons along with a level depth knob in the center. How good those effects are depends on the software you use. I can't really believe that Serato still haven't given their effects an overhaul after all this time, and the ones in Rekordbox are definitely superior, but when it comes to activating and using them, the REV5 does a great job. The paddles don't feel as premium as those on the REV7, but work well and should take a beating. The effects are post fader and post crossfader on both software platforms, which is an essential for me. One thing I often forget to mention in reviews, there is a dedicated sampler volume knob. I know some DJs really miss that when it isn't there. The EQ section is laid out mostly like the REV7 with the 3 EQs in a line and the filter and trim knobs on the outside. Straightforward and comfortable, it does have one more trick up its sleeve, Stem EQ. Although already available in other software, this feature was first seen earlier this year in Serato DJ Pro and Rekordbox on the FLX 10 and is a very nice addition. You enable it by holding shift and pressing the cue assignment for your chosen deck, and then you can cut or boost the drums, melody and bass together and vocals individually. In Rekordbox there is only drums, melody and vocals to begin with. This isn't my preferred way of working with stems. I like instant on or off or stem effects, but I suspect that might be because I don't own any hardware which supports Stem EQ, and if the idea does appeal to you, then it is very well implemented here.
I thought I heard your words. Tell me, how do I feel? Tell me now, how do I feel? How does it feel? Does it feel? How does it feel? Does it feel? Does it feel? Does it feel?
Queuing is fairly comprehensive. There are buttons to select which channel you are queuing and a Cue Master blend knob next to the level control and both sizes of headphone socket on the front panel. Split queue is a bit of a weird one though. The REV5 does have it, but there is no physical switch to activate it. You can enable or disable split queue in the settings menu in Rekordbox, but with Serato DJ Pro that's not possible. Instead you have to open up the utility menu on the hardware itself and navigate to the setting via a series of different LEDs in the level meters. This can be done on the fly whilst the unit is in use, but I wouldn't recommend it in case you accidentally change another setting by mistake. So my conclusion is, if you use split queue and always leave it on, great, but if you constantly turn it on and off during your performances, this probably isn't the controller for you. There's one fairly major thing I haven't discussed yet, the fact that despite appearances the REV5 is a 4-deck controller. Yes, there are buttons on each deck to swap to decks 3 and 4, but there are of course no accompanying extra faders or EQs. So when you push those buttons, the entire left or right side of the unit, deck, faders, pads, EQs, filters and trims enter a kind of soft takeover state. This means that they will remain set to what they were in the virtual mixer until you move them to that position, at which point the physical controls take over. This enables some pretty cool features like dual deck mode and others I will show you, but for me as a conventional 4-deck controller this is not ideal at all. Soft takeover works when you have LEDs or displays next to or around controls, like a ring of LEDs around a pot, but the REV5 has none of that, and during my longer testing sessions I found it all too easy to lose track of where my levels or EQs were set to as time went on. So I wouldn't really recommend the REV5 for conventional 4-deck mixing, but there are some instances where it can come in handy, mainly for those techniques where you might want to park a track on a different deck. For example, the REV5 inherits the deck swap feature from the DJ-MS11. Hold shift and load on the opposite deck and the unit will move deck 1 to deck 4 or deck 2 to deck 3. This is great at the end of a blend when you might want to offload a track to play out on one of those decks whilst you load and drop another one on one of the main decks. It's a feature I've seen used creatively to great effect on the S11 in the past, and it works just as well here. Moving on to the pads, they're just good. A bit smaller than those on the REV7, but still plenty big enough, and they have a great feel with bright RGB illumination. With Serato DJ Pro, the modes are largely what you'd expect, with hot cue, pitch play, saved flips, loop roll, slicer loop, stems, sampler, scratch bank and 2 user mappable modes. There's also one new mode which is unique to the REV5 however, piano play. Think of it as pitch play but on steroids. It takes over the pads on both sides, creating effectively a piano keyboard across the whole pad section, and can be switched between different octaves and scales, minor pentatonic, major and major pentatonic. It's not a feature for me, I can't really see myself using it, but in the hands of someone who's more musical and into tone play stuff like 69 beats, it will be an absolute weapon for sure. You might think that losing access to the pads on the other deck to be able to use piano play might be a problem, but that is offset by the extra controls above each deck. In place of the instant scratch buttons on the REV7, the 5 instead has a stem section. Here you can quickly disable and enable each of the 4 stems, or alternatively double tap the stems button and work in solo mode instead. As a heavy user of stems I absolutely love this, but it's worth noting that those buttons are in fact multifunction. You can switch them over to hot cues, saved loops, sampler and scratch bank too, so whatever your performance style, you will find something useful for you there.
Treat me like you do when you play.
Above that we have an auto loop button along with buttons to halve and double the length of that, and you can do manual loops on shift. There is a pitch range button along with key lock, sync, slip, mode, sensor and key adjust controls, and there's the pitch slider itself which is long, accurate and has a physical click at 0 with very little dead space around that. The library controls are great with a browse knob on each deck, a dedicated load button and a back button. This is largely how things are done on Pioneer DJ's battle mixers, so users of those will feel comfortable right away. There's one more new innovative feature to show you, but before I do, a note on software. I did most of my testing with Serato DJ Pro, as that's my performance software of choice as a rule, but the Rekordbox mapping on the REV5 is notable in a way because of just how the same it is. For a long time it felt like dual software Pioneer DJ devices were built around one platform first and the other software was kind of shoehorned into it. But it seems like those days are gone, as the REV5 offers an almost identical workflow with both Serato and Rekordbox. All the new features as well as the basics work in exactly the same way, apart from Rekordbox also having pad effects which Serato doesn't. So that makes the REV5 an ideal candidate for those who are unsure about which software they prefer or who enjoy switching back and forth. Now let's get on to that last cool feature. So let me talk you through this last feature. This is a very neat feature indeed. It's one of those that Pioneer DJ, they put on their kit, and if it goes well and gets a great response from DJs, you'll see it again. If it doesn't, it will disappear forever. But I think this one might well stick around. This might pop up on some other gear in future because it's actually genuinely quite useful and very cool. Auto BPM transition. So on a base level, what it will do is transition from one BPM to another over a set period of time. So 1, 2, 4, or 8 bars. And it will adjust the BPM of this track to match the other track on the other deck. So let me show you how that's working. I've got a 124 BPM track over here and a 105 track over here. And I'm just going to hit, it's going to do it over 2 bars. Let me hit it now. So let's turn off this auto loop, make sure everything's normal. And I'm going to hit it. And now the BPM over 2 bars is going to drop from 124 to 105. And now I can drop in. Very neat, right? It's clever. It's just smooth and it's slick. There are lots of ways to do BPM transitions manually using sync. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but this is a pretty cool way of doing it, especially when you start adding in the extra source that you can add on top, right? So let me show you what we're going to do with that. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to hold down this select button. If you hold shift in the select button, you can choose how long the transition takes. That's how you choose that length. But I'm going to hold down the select button and I'm going to say during this transition, I want to do the stems. So I want the drums to go away, right? And the bass as well. We'll just have vocal and melody during this transition. Also, while you're holding that select button, you can choose to activate a loop. So I'm going to activate a 4-beat loop while I'm doing it, and I'm going to turn off key lock. So as it goes down in BPM, the pitch will also go down as well. So that is my transition all set up and ready to go. So I'm going to play this now, jump to a section that's got vocals so you can hear it. I'll get to the end of my phrase and I'm going to hit it now. You can hear the stems have activated, got the loop is activated, the key lock has gone off, it's going down in pitch. And obviously it's not in key right now because these tracks aren't in key, but I hope you get the idea, right? It's pretty clever. So you can automate all of that stuff in one go, which is stuff, you know, there's so much going on there, you couldn't do that manually. There's that much going on, stems and the loop and the key lock and the BPM transition all in one go. So this is one of those things where it's not just a novelty. This is genuinely doing some stuff that I don't think any human DJ could replicate. You know, I'm sure there's some people could probably figure it out with multiple fingers, you know, those kind of clever people. But like, I think in general, that's something that would be very hard to pull off in a precise fashion on the fly like that. And it's very neat. And you can go up, you can go down, you can go from one side to the other and then back up again. There's all kinds of ways of working with it. The only thing that kind of got me a bit weird with it was when I tried to use it with sync, because the sync in Serato tried to kind of pull both tracks together at times. So I would suggest in use that you might want to just make sure that sync is turned off if you're habitually a sync user, because that might make it behave in some kind of weird ways. But in general, yeah, a really neat feature and one that I certainly would not be mad to see on other devices in the future. Before I wrap up, I just want to bring in some more context for the pricing of the REV5. At $1,100 street price, it's roughly halfway between the REV1 and the REV7, and that feels correct to me. But Pioneer DJ don't just make REV controllers, so unless you're an absolute battle layout diehard, then it makes sense to also look at the other controllers in their range, the Flex series. The Flex 4 is the budget one, equivalent to the REV1, and then there is the Flex 6 GT at $650. Is the REV5 worth the extra $450 over the Flex 6? To me, absolutely. It's a much more pro-level piece with balanced outputs, which the 6 lacks, a better crossfader, adjustable tension on the Jog Wheels, and the Serato mapping on the 6 GT really doesn't feel that great to me. But alternatively, you could also jump up to the Flex 10, and that's where the decision might get tougher. That has a street price of $1,700, and it does have some actual advantages over the Flex 5. Hardware effects, really nice in-jog displays, and some cool stem-specific effects. Having 4 physical mixer channels will also make for a superior experience if you regularly mix with 3 or 4 decks too. So is that worth the $500 extra? Well, that's going to be up to you to decide, and a lot of that will come down to how much you enjoy using battle as opposed to club layout kit. As someone who is comfortable on both, I would find that a really hard decision, because as powerful as the Flex 10 is, I always have an absolute blast playing on the REV5. The whole 2 decks and a battle mixer kind of vibe will always get my creative juices flowing, and that's where the REV5 really shines. So there you go, my thoughts on the DDJ-REV5 from Pioneer DJ. Putting aside the intricacies of the Pioneer DJ controller lineup in 2023, and yeah, it's pretty complicated, but just looking at the REV5 as part of the REV family, it sits in there really well. You've got the entry-level REV1 at the low end, you've got the high-end, all-singing, all-dancing REV7, and then somewhere in the middle in terms of price and feature set, you now have the DDJ-REV5. I will point out that as someone who doesn't own a REV7 but who has spent a lot of time using a REV7 over the past 18 months, I felt immediately at home on the REV5. The way the features are all laid out, the way it performs, very, very similar. You can still see where the money's going, the extra cash to get that REV7, yeah, you can see where your money is being spent. And certainly when it comes to like hardware effects and so on, those are missing from the 5. But if you are looking for some REV7 vibes at a much more affordable price, then yeah, the 5 is going to suit you very well indeed. And you know, I'm from the UK where CDJs have been the standard issue in clubs and bars for 20 years. So as much as I love spinning platters, I was also very comfortable on the static jogs here on the REV5 because they are CDJ style mechanical jogs, my favorite static platters that there are. So again, that comfort factor was there right away. In terms of value, I think it's actually really on point. You know, people talk about the Pioneer DJ tax and how things are really expensive and so on compared to other brands. I don't think that's the case here with this REV5. I think they've done well to bring it in at the price it's at, and it remains a really professional piece of kit. You've got all the hookups you need, the 2 USBs, the balanced XLR outputs and balanced booth output as well. So yeah, overall it's a pro piece of kit at a very reasonable price, and I thoroughly recommend it if you're into battle style. I know some DJs just aren't feeling that, and if you're not, well, there are other products in the Pioneer DJ lineup that will suit you better. But if you're into the battle style thing, yeah, the REV5 is a great piece of kit. In the comments this week, let's talk battle style or traditional layout. What did you start with? Have you switched over to something else? If you could spec out your own dream controller, what kind of layout would it have on it? Thank you for watching this episode of Beatsource Tech. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. I'll see you next time.